In this lesson, we're going to be talking about the files where user and group information are stored. We'll eventually get into actually creating users and modifying users and so forth, but first I want to show you actually where those files are stored. The etc directory or /etc is where system configuration files are, and some of those system configuration files are password files and group files. The first one I want to look at is the password file. You'll notice it's spelled PASSWD. Unix has a long history of things being shortened in order to conserve space and also to have some efficiency when you're typing. So we're looking at the password file, and the password file, in spite of its name, doesn't actually have passwords in it. Now these fields are all colon delimited. The first field is the username. The second field will have an X in it, and the X indicates that the password is actually stored in the shadow file, and we'll get to the shadow file in just a minute or so. The next field is the user ID. The system doesn't actually use the username when it's referring internally to users. It uses the user ID because numbers are easier for the operating system to deal with than strings. Strings take a lot of processing power and time to deal with. So we use numbers. The user ID is the system version of the username that we're more familiar with. The next field, you'll see also a 0 here, is the primary group that the user belongs to. The user can belong to multiple groups. This is just the primary group that the user belongs to. The next field, and it's not as obvious here as it would be if I were to drop down to the very bottom where my user is. And again, you'll see the username and then the password field, which is an X, the user ID, the group ID, and then the real name. This is the field where the real name is stored. If we go back up to the top, in this case, it's saying the real name is root. Now, the next field is the home directory. When you log in, this is the directory that you are placed into. This is where all of your user files are stored when you are doing things on the system, creating files and so forth. This is where those files are actually going to be stored for you. This is your home directory. The next is the program that's actually going to be run when you log in an interactive way. In this case, it's bash. Bash is the name of the shell that root actually uses. We'll be dealing with shells and what all of that means as we go along here, but I wanted to point out some differences. The field here for bin is sbin no login. That particular program or executable will actually not provide you with any ability to actually do anything. It's really going to boot you out when you try to log in using that username. So I can't effectively log in with the user bin or daemon or ADM or LP or a number of these others that have the sbin no login field. So the sbin no login field would be used for users that are associated with particular services. For example, we have a postfix user down here. The postfix user has sbin no login. The postfix user is the user that's attached to the service that provides mail. We don't actually want that user to log in. We just want the service postfix to run as the postfix user. So we create a user there and then don't provide it the ability to actually log in an interactive way. The next file I want to show, and I'm actually using cat here. Cat is short for concatenate. And normally I could concatenate multiple files and create one really big file. If I only provide one name, all it's really doing is printing out the contents of the file to the screen. So we're going to use cat a lot. You'll see that pretty regularly as I'm showing files or the contents of files. I'm going to use cat to do it. You'll see the structure here is similar to the password file. This is our shadow file, and this is actually where the passwords are stored. You can see the user here is root, and this really long string is the password. Now, this isn't the password that I have to type in when I'm logging in as root. What this really is a cryptographic hash of the password. When you log in, the system generates a cryptographic hash of the string that you have typed, and then it compares that cryptographic hash to the cryptographic hash that's stored. If they match, you are successfully logged in. You'll see that most of these don't actually have a password. You'll see the double exclamation point there. These users can't actually log in. They don't have a password. Now, my user, of course, has a password, and the root user has a password, but none of the others actually have passwords. The last file I want to show you is the group file. The group file is where we store information about the groups and their group IDs, as well as the users that are assigned to particular groups. Going back up here to the top, we've got the group root. And the group root, similarly, doesn't have a password associated with it, so there's an X there. We have the group ID, which in this case is 0. And then after the last colon, you'll see the users that are actually associated with that particular group. In the case of root, root's primary group is the root group, and so we don't actually have to put root there because it's just automatically assigned. This would be where I have other users I want to assign to a particular group. My user, similarly, down at the bottom, there was a group created for my user. That's just kind of what happens. And my group ID here is 500. I don't actually have any other users that I've attached to the group, but I can do that. And the reason for doing that is when we start talking about permissions, you'll find that there are group permissions on files and objects. If I wanted to have a collection of people have the same set of permissions, Linux doesn't actually have a concept of access control lists as well as other operating systems like Windows, for example. In that case, what I need to do is I need to put everybody who needs a particular set of permissions into a group and then give the group the permissions, and then everybody inherits the permissions from the group they are assigned to or attached to. Now, those are the files that are involved with users and groups and logging in and permissions. We're going to be talking about how to actually create users and modify users and handle all of those administrative functions. But underneath all of that are these three files: the password file and the shadow file and the group file.